Welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. Hey, you guys, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. I am super duper excited to be here with you today. Thank you for tuning in and spending a little time with me. If you're somebody who is watching the show, just ignore just ignore those things on the floor over there. I'm in the middle of a wicked big organization project, which I love to do. And many of you may or may not know this fun fact. Way back in the day, we're talking like 1999, maybe. I was a professional organizer for a short period of time, and I had my own little business, and I called it Divine Order. And I even still have my first little business card. It was so cute. But I'm in the middle of organizing my closet back there, getting rid of a ton of shit. And I should do a whole podcast episode on that about letting go of those things that we have these attachments to. But that's another story for another day. But anyways, just ignore that. And we're back. Okay. So buckle up for safety. So you know how last week the episode was called It's Not You? And I kind of alluded in that episode that there was going to be a part two, a part due. And that sometimes so this is it. This is the part two. Here's the follow-up to this. And this sucker is called Sometimes It Is You. Boo. Boo, rats. No, say it isn't so. But yes, sometimes it is about you. Sometimes it is you. And we're going to dive into this a little bit because one of the things that I see more and more in the transformational coaching community or in the spiritual community is kind of this thing where, and whether you call it spiritual bypassing or you call it, I don't know, deflection, or you call it like whatever you want to call it. Those are all just like fancy ways of saying that I'm just going to avoid the truth. I'm going to pretend like this isn't happening, and I'm going to just ignore what's really going on here. And a lot of times I see things online. So I often say that I don't like a lot of the quote unquote spiritual memes that are put out there because they're kind of stated as facts. Like there's no wiggle room. There's no room for nuance or for situational differences and stuff like that. And one of the things that I saw happening was that people were kind of doing this hot potato thing, right? Where if you were to say something to them about their, let's call it tone of voice, their choice, their action, their behavior, a thing that they did, a way that they treated you, like whatever, people would start to say things like, oh, they're just trying to project their shit onto me. I'm not responsible for their feelings. It's not my fault that you feel that way. Or I'm sorry that you feel that way. Or if you've ever said this, that's not about me. That's just your stuff. That's just her stuff, their stuff, right? Okay, then if you've said these things repeatedly, there might be an opportunity for you to have, a little tongue in cheek here, a little come to Jesus moment with yourself. You might just want to, as the old song says, you might want to check yourself before you wreck yourself, because while we are not responsible, there's truth in that, right? We're not responsible what another person chooses to feel. We are not responsible for the interpretation that they made about what you said or what you did. We cannot control the meaning that people assign to our words and our actions, because the reality of it is that nobody, quote unquote, nobody makes another person feel anything. And I'm just talking emotionally. I'm not talking about like, of course, if somebody is physically hurting you, harming you, hitting you, right? Somebody is causing you that kind of physical pain. I'm not talking about that. So while we are not responsible with how another person interprets things or hears things or whatever, we are responsible for what we think, what we say, and what we do. And we are definitely responsible for how we think it, how we say it, and how we do it. Because the content, the intention, and the delivery is all about you. It is all on you. And there may have been times in your life when you have acted as if, I love this saying. I want to say it came from, I know I've quoted her name before and it's not coming to me off the top of my head. I want to say her, Gillespie is in there, the name. But this word, like acting like a volcanic asshole, right? So if you happen to act like a volcanic asshole, and another person happens to notice, and they come to you to talk to you about it and to say something to you, you don't get to just hot potato that thing back to them. And if you're too young to know what the hot potato is, just imagine that you've taken a hot potato out of an oven. You know how friggin' hot those things can be. And somebody just tosses it to you, but you don't have any oven mitts on. And you're like, oh my God. And like you juggle it, right? So if somebody just tries to pass it off to you, this hot piece of crap, right? Right onto you. It's like if you've behaved if you've behaved with a certain amount of like douchebaggery and then somebody tries to come to you to have a conversation with you about it, or they're brave enough to have a discussion, like they're not coming to you to like attack you or be mean to you or shame you, but they're just sharing like, hey, when you said that thing, I felt like this. If somebody's brave enough to point something out to you, you don't just get to like stop, drop, and roll. Like you don't just get to kind of like roll away from your responsibility for what you did. And the reality of it is that a lot of people these days try to take spiritual principles and use them as weapons against other people. They try to shed their responsibility. And a lot of people will say things like, anything that you don't like in another person is just a reflection of something that you don't like in yourself. Now, while that can sometimes be true, it is not always true. There might be things that I see in another person, the form that it's taking, that I don't like somebody being cruel to animals, right? That is not, now, maybe in my past, right? In my past, when I still ate animals and I wore leather and I did all those things, right? Blah, blah, blah. Not to blah 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 that they're not still important, but I try my best not to do any of those things anymore. You know what I mean? So not everything can be pointed to, and people will say, oh, anytime you criticize somebody else, you're just holding up, they're just holding up a mirror. They're reflecting back to you something that you don't like in yourself. So it's like this way of never having to take responsibility for the fact that maybe you did do something. Like maybe you are the common denominator in a situation or a bunch of uncomfy situations where you're just trying to like duck and bob and weave, right? The fallout or the repercussions or the consequences of being yourself. And you don't want it to be you. You don't want it to be you. It's way easier to blame other people, right? People think that it's just way easier to put the blame out there, to make it about them. You're the problem, right? I'm pointing out away from myself. You're the problem. You're the reason I feel this way. It's not about me. And the thing is, though, if somebody cares enough about you, whether it's a sweetie, a sibling, a friend, a coworker, whoever it is, a coach, a mentor, if a person cares about you enough to compassionately like kind of point out some of your what I call blind spots to your own bullshit, it might behoove us. If somebody comes to you and is like, hey, can we talk about something? Right? It might behoove us to put down our need to protect this persona, this identity, this idea, this little ego creation that we create. And the ego is always fearful. The ego is like always afraid of being found out, right? That it's not quote unquote perfect. You know, so if somebody comes to you, it might behoove us to not just try to say, oh, this isn't about me, that this is them. It's not my fault that they don't X, Y, and Z. It's important in relationships and building trust and connection and friendships and building families, etc., that we want to be able to take a solid look at our role and how things play out. We don't just get to like turn a blind eye and a blind ear, as I would also say. Because a lot of times people try to use spiritual language to, what's the word I'm looking for? to just kind of like mm, dodge, right? Dodge what might be coming at them, or they want to pour like spiritual language on top of shitty, narcissistic, or selfish, or insecure, or transactional behavior. You know what I mean? So if somebody comes to you and they're upset, or they're concerned, or they're confused about a conversation they had with you, or an interaction, or a post that they saw, or something they overheard you say, a situation, we don't want to just like ping, 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 like Wonder Woman bracelets, ding, 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 and just deflect things and put it all on them. I mean, we do have to take responsibility. Sometimes it is about us. We can't just always deflect. And just because we don't like to hear things sometimes, it doesn't mean that things didn't happen that way, that things didn't go down that way, that you weren't using that tone of voice. My sweetie and I often talk about it, like if there was a camera crew, right, following us around all the time, and we just kind of forgot that they were there. So we were just acting as if we would normally behave and act and speak or whatever. And then later they could go back and play, in football games, or sports games, they'll say, let's go to the replay, Cal. Right? If we could go to the replay, and we had like given it like 24 hours to calm the fuck down, or to relax, or not have our panties in such a bunch, not being so defensive with our dukes up or whatever. And we saw the replay of ourselves, we might be shocked. We might be wicked surprised to hear our own tone of voice, to hear our lack of listening, to hear how we are persistent in our defense, how we do not have patience with other people, right? The way that we roll our eyes, these habits and these patterns that we do, and we are no longer aware of them. So we just walk around thinking that it's everybody else. But one of the requirements for an authentic spiritual life is a willingness to look at oneself, to be able to sit down and pause and get still and get quiet and take a little, inventory, as they might say in some 12-step programs, right? To kind of look at our own stuff, our own shit, our own, again, patterns. And whether those patterns or behaviors or ways of thinking, speaking, acting were created out of trauma from our childhoods and stuff, of course, I have deep compassion for that. And at some point, we still have to take responsibility for who and how we are being now. And I just think that, again, this willingness to look at ourselves, and P.S., that goes beyond just individual humans. I think this is important for governments and countries and stuff to also take a look at themselves and their brutal histories and their deep, systemic racism, all the systems that keep oppression and racism and other things in place, misogyny, hate, all of it, right? It's important that as a collective of a bunch of individuals that make up a community, a neighborhood, a business, a company, a country, that's also important. And so if we can accept that sometimes it is you, sometimes it is about you. And I jokingly say to my clients sometimes, I hate to break it to you. I hate to break it to you, but sometimes it is about you. Sometimes you are the problem. Sometimes it is your lack of self-awareness or your lack of willingness to shift your perspective, to look at something differently, to let this person out of this prison, this box, this idea that you've created about somebody else, to not let yourself out of some identity that you created for yourself as you were kind of growing up in the environments and with the experiences and the beliefs that you created and blah, 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 right? Just the way that identity gets created. And, one of the requirements, right, is to take a look at yourself. And I always say we've got to be willing to own both our brilliance, because we got to be willing to celebrate our light as well, our goodness and the things that we have strengths in. But we also have to be willing to like own our bullshit and own those places where maybe we do have some some, call them weaknesses, call them areas where we could grow, where we could maybe get stronger, where maybe we could, like, again, stop being so defensive and put down our deuce and stuff like that. So if we're going to do this, it means sometimes we have to be willing to own it. And we have to be willing to say if somebody comes to you, and it can be really tempting, right? It can just be really tempting to go, oh, that's not mine, that's yours. And I often say to people, you do got to know what's yours and what's not yours. But you don't know what's yours if you're not spending any time doing some self-reflection. If you don't have a DSP and a daily spiritual practice where you have some moments of rigorous and vigorous, right? Vigilance, some vigilance of honesty with yourself. We got to be willing to own it. And there has to be some version of you that is willing to say some version of, like, I'm sorry, or you're right. I fucked up. I made a mistake. I was clumsy. I was selfish. I was scared. I was being insecure. Like, I acted like a phony. I lied. I cheated. I copied. I was competitive. I blew it, right? Like, some part of us has to be willing to own that. And then if we can go even a step further and say, thank you for telling me. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for caring enough about me to, like, bring this to my attention. I'm sorry, right? And then, like, please forgive me. Please forgive me. And the reality of it is, there have been some friendships. I can just speak personally in my own life. There have been some friendships that, eventually fell apart, drifted away, like whatever, because if you're not able in a relationship to go to another person and say, hey, this event happened. This is how I saw it. This is how I felt. I don't like when you speak to me that way. I don't like when you X, Y, like whatever the person is going to say. We have to be willing at different points in our life. And whether that's in school or at our internship or from our softball coach or from our spiritual mentor or from your lover, your best friend, your sweetie, your whoever, anybody you're trying to have a real relationship with, right? Real connection. We got to be able to receive some sort of compassionate feedback. And that word compassion, is really important. People don't usually, like, you think about it, people don't like to receive feedback because they're so afraid of what the other person is going to say. But if somebody really loves you, if somebody has proven themselves to be gentle and tender with you, and you know them not to be cruel or mean, again, it's important that we're able to listen and to hear. And, part of this is that if we can't handle having, like, some honest dialogue, we're not going to get very far in our relationships. We have to be open. We have to be open and to being wrong once in a while. I know, ew. And I understand, because for a lot of people, especially the perfectionist, right? And the people pleasers and stuff like that, it can feel like a threat. It can feel like a true physical, emotional, whatever threat, but it feels threatening when you're afraid that you've done something wrong. Because if you were a child that grew up with abandonment issues, with being afraid that you got rewarded all the time for being the intelligent kid, for being the smart one, for being the one who was easy, for being the one who X, Y, and Z. And then somebody comes to you and says, you're not doing it right, or you screwed up, or whatever. There's this terror. There can be this terror, this alarm in the body that's like, oh my God, they're going to leave me. I'm in trouble, like da, 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 da. And it's like, no, sometimes if you're willing to have those conversations with people, when they come to you and they say, can we talk about this? Can I share a little feedback, like, about what my experience was? Even if it's uncomfortable in the moment, that can be a really powerful and healing conversation. In fact, you might find yourselves being even closer because you can realize that there can be a misunderstanding, there can be a disagreement, there can be some turbulence and some upset. It's kind of like, on a plane, when you're on the plane starts to shake and there's all this turbulence and some part of your brain goes like, oh shit, we're going down, we're all dead, holy Christ, and then it levels off. And you realize you're holding the hand of the person next to you who was a stranger like 5 seconds ago. And then everybody just kind of smiles and laughs and the moment is past. And then you feel more connected because you've been through a thing, because you realize that your relationship and your love is strong enough to actually be wrong, have a disagreement, kiss and make up. You know what I mean? So if we're not willing to own that there are going to be times, just by the nature of our own humanity, where we are going to screw up, we are going to get it wrong, we are going to act like a prima donna or a selfish jerk, or we weren't paying attention and we misspoke, or we were impatient, or we were short with somebody, we're going to step on some toes, and some other person's feelings, right? They might feel hurt by that. Again, we can't control what they do with it, but we are responsible for how we're saying things, how we're thinking things, the choices we're making, the actions we're doing, our tone of voice, our quality of attention, all those things. And if we're not willing to do these things, we might end up with less compadres, right? Less comrades, less close confidants. You might not have as many clients. You might not have as deep connections. You might not make as much cash, right? It can affect your business. You might lose your clout, the respect that people have for you. You might lose your credibility if we're not willing to say to ourselves, yeah, that was me. Sometimes it is you. Sometimes, Houston, we have a problem. Sometimes you are the problem. And if you look in your life, I often jokingly will say to somebody, when somebody's complaining about everybody in their life, they're like, this one does this wrong, this one does this wrong, da 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 da. And I'll say, okay, but who's the common denominator? Like, what's the common denominator here? And they're like, me. And I'm like, yeah. And it's not always like, oh, you're the problem, but it might be that your way of framing things, your perspective might be off. Because remember, the ego mind, right? The brain, we've talked about this before, the neuroscience of this. We kind of have this negativity bias where we're always looking for what's wrong. And our brain thinks that it's keeping us safe. But the one place we don't go looking sometimes is within ourselves, and maybe some patterns or conditioning or behaviors and ways of being that we have that are actually no longer serving us. I've known people in my life who cannot answer a damn thing straight. Everything has to be tinged with sarcasm, with some sort of joke. And I'd be like, I don't know if I can take you seriously. Like there's this thing. And if you said to them like, hey, can you try being serious, or can you take that tone of voice out? Like, I really want to connect with you. And they're not able to do it. So first and foremost, the other thing I want to say though is this. There are people who never want to look at themselves because they never want it to be about themselves. And then on the flip, this is like I'm making a little love letter from my heart to some of you. There are some of us and some of you, some of we who have a tendency to make everything about themselves, meaning that you always think that you're the problem. And if that's you, like, go listen to my previous episode. It's not you. Sometimes it is us. Sometimes it isn't us. And the work is in figuring out what is ours and what is not ours to carry. What is ours to apologize for, what is not ours to apologize for. Where we blew it and maybe we didn't, right? And collectively too, to keep in mind that when we exist in structures and systems that are designed to keep everybody attacking one another so that you're not looking at the system itself, Sometimes it's not either of you. Sometimes it's that. It's the man. It's the thing. You know what I'm saying? So we have to be careful sometimes too to look where the responsibility really lies, because we've been deeply conditioned in our childhoods and in our young adulthoods and even into our adulthoods and even into our collective consciousness thinking. There's bigger things at play sometimes. So, but all we can be responsible for is ourselves. And we have to be willing. Again, I hate to break it to you, but sometimes it is about you. Sometimes it is you. The calls are coming from inside the house. You might be the problem. So if somebody kindly and compassionately brings it to you, maybe it's important that you sit your ass down and listen, right? And sift through it and try not to be reactive. Try to really listen to what they're saying. And a lot of times people aren't complaining or bringing something to your attention to shame you, to blame you, to make you feel bad. It's because they actually want a situation to work. They want the relationship to work. When you think about corporate jobs, when they give you your review, they're trying to let you know, here are the things that you're doing really well. I mean, at least I hope they're letting you know the things you're doing really well. And then here are some things, some areas where maybe there could be some improvement. And if we think about that, it's like, who doesn't want to improve? Who doesn't want to get better? I mean, maybe I should only speak for myself. I mean, I want to be the best version of myself that I can be. And a lot of times that means we have to let go of these old patterns of survival mechanisms, these things that we cultivated and created and ran with as children, right? As young people that now kind of get in the way. So what used to be, I might do a whole podcast on this, what used to be adaptive is now maladaptive. So I hope this is helpful in some way. And I hope it encourages you to be willing to take in the wholeness of yourself, right? Where none of us are perfect. P.S. None of us are perfect. We all have some refining we can do. You know what I'm saying? We all have some rough edges and some places where maybe we're not aware, of the way that we always talk to a particular person. And I see these patterns in action, right? I just spent some time with my family at an event for a celebration of life. And all you have to do is step into a familial situation, right? Not just familiar, but these family situations. And if you can just kind of like zoom out and stand back, kind of like float above the room as an observer, you will even see yourself dropping into particular patterns of behavior, these ways that we do things when we get a little too comfortable and a little too familiar, and we're not watching our tone of voice. We're not watching how we're speaking to one another. There can be a lack of caring. So interesting in families and in groups when you get wicked comfy. Now, I'm not saying you can't josh each other and rib each other and, give each other, pick on each other a little bit. I mean, New Englanders were famous for that. Like where we rib you, we give you a hard time, we bust your balls because we like you, right? There's a certain amount of that for sure. And if you can recognize that it's coming from true love and genuine affection, that's fine. But there are times when it crosses the line. And it can be cruelty disguised as, I'm just joking. Get a thicker skin. You're a little too sensitive. Don't you know how this works? Blah, blah, blah. So I'm not in it for the mean stuff, but it's more like the wink, wink. I'm just pulling your chain a little bit, kid, because I like you. You know what I mean? Okay. I hope this has been helpful in some way. I've been thinking about this a lot because you see a lot of it just out in the world and online where people are not willing to take responsibility, and they use a lot of this spiritual mumbo jumbo and this bullshit to just kind of say, oh, it's not me, it's them. They've got the issue. No, motherfucker, sometimes it is you. Take a look in the mirror. Take a look in the soul mirror. Like, let's have an honest come to Jesus moment with ourselves. Like, as they say, like I said, you got to take a personal inventory. I always say you got to look in the soul mirror. You got to go like, ooh, yeah, I was kind of clumsy there. And, ideally and hopefully, it's an opportunity for growth. Let me just stop right there. It's an opportunity for growth, and it's yours for the taking if you're willing and brave enough to do it. So just know, though, no matter what. You are worthy. Even if you've blown it, even if you have been clumsy, you are worthy. You are good. You are lovable. You are enough. Okay. Just because you make a mistake, you're still lovable. But it's a lot I shouldn't say but, and it's a lot easier to mend some things when we're willing to take responsibility and say, yeah, you know what? You're right. That was on me. That was me. It is me. In this case, it is me. All right, you guys. I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. And anything you want to find out about, I'm wicked easy to find, you guys. Karen Kenney, KarenKenney.com. You can find me on my website if you want to join my spiritual mentoring group, The Nest, if you ever want to work together one-to-one in the quest, if you want to do a hot-to-hot day, which can be wicked fun, if you want to come to a yoga class, like whatever. All the shenanigans are online, easy to find. You can also find me on social media. Most of you already know where to find me there. Come be my friend over there. It's kind of fun. All right. Have an amazing rest of the day. Wherever you go, may you leave the people, the animals, the place, the environment, and yourself better than how you found it. Wherever you go, may you and your energy and your presence and your love and your willingness to be, honest with yourself be a blessing. Bye.